actually have a question for Aadil. You mentioned that you've grown here for 42 years. I'm part of the Hindu community. I want to know how you've engaged with the people of my community so far. You speak of the cultural support you give to the community and stuff.
Put me on the spot here, hey. Sorry, what's your name, sir?
Yash.
Yash, okay. So you're Indian, of course, and yeah. Okay. So Yash, I've approached over the past few weeks. I've approached 3 institutions. I've approached the Linton Temple, and I've approached the Swaminarayan Mandir in Kingsbury. I've approached the Wilson Mandir. You must know the trustee of the Linton Temple. The trustee of the Linton Temple is a prominent gentleman called Mayank Patel.
Yeah.
There's another, do you know Mayank?
Yeah.
Okay. Then also in Wilsden, there's a trustee called Gurjibai and Vishambai. You must know them as well.
I've heard.
Yeah. So I sat down with them comprehensively over the past couple of weeks. I discussed issues that are pertaining to the Indian, Hindu and Gujarati community, and issues that are related to...
Sorry.
No worries. Issues that are pertaining to the local Indian community, obviously hate crimes against Indians, and of course restricted parking times that are unfairly discriminating against temples, and of course anti-social behaviour aspects, fly tipping, that concern the temples. I've spoken to them at length, and they've given me their vote of confidence. And I will adhere to stand not just for Muslims, Jews, Christians, but also my Indian brothers, Hindus and Sikhs. I was at a Gurudwara visiting the trustees of the Brent East Community Centre as well. I trust that answers your question, sir.
It was the last 42 years, not the last 3 weeks, because you're running for election, but that's fine. Yeah.
I mean,
James.
Yeah.
But yeah, that does answer my question. I mean, it's impressive how far you've engaged so far, and I hope that if I do vote for you, that is, you continue doing that, support all the communities, given the current state of geopolitical affairs. The Brent community is way divided right now, and we need that support.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you support a comprehensive two-way embargo on the trade in weapons, components and military technology with Israel to ensure that Britain and its citizens are not complicit in aiding and abetting crimes including genocide? I think really need to have the 2 main parties really.
Yes, agreed.
Because you guys are going to have to all the leaders in Parliament. So
Yeah, we specifically said not just Israel, but any state that is alleged to commit war crimes, we absolutely need to look at the way that we license arms exports.
We have enough blood on our hands.
Yeah.
Doing more.
I think Israel is obviously very, very important, but it's not the only country committing war crimes in the world.
no, it isn't. There's half a dozen, if not a dozen.
So I think we would look to
But I think it would be very topical now because I think it's in the media and everybody's complaining because it's never ending.
No, I understand. And that's a clear answer to that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jonny, I've got to pull you up on that. Your response to an arms embargo in Israel is it's not the only country. There could be 10 murderers in this room. It doesn't make them any less a murderer.
No, exactly. And we would apply the full force of law to all attack.
Jamila, do you want to buy it or did it show you?
No.
Jamshaid, can we try and wrap it up, yeah?
Yeah.
Islamophobia as well, please.
Yeah, I want to go on to Islamophobia. I had a whole page on that one, and if you look around the room, there are a lot of people interested in that one, right? So I'll just try to pick out the ones that are key. Right. Islamophobia is prejudice and hatred of Islam and Muslims which leads to discrimination, abuse and attacks on members of the Muslim community. Do you recognise that as a serious issue and concern, and do you commit to addressing it, and how? Who wants to go first?
Well, I mentioned it earlier, but it is using the full force of the law whenever Islamophobia is committed, and it's as simple as that. It's done for any other form of racism, and it should be the same for Islamophobia. And we really need to stop making it okay for politicians and political editors of the BBC, for example, or GB News, where they talk about on a consistent basis that Muslims are a massive problem, when that is absolutely not the case. They are such an integral part of society in the UK, and an amazing set of people that I've got to spend the past few years with in my local community as well. We really just need to use the full force of the law whenever Islamophobia is committed.
Yeah, I think there's a subtle point as well to the whole Islamophobia debate, right? So there's a bit where you've got people in the media and also people in the public who are doing overt action, right? And we get that, and you can recognise that. Anyway, you say that's hate, and you've got to address it. But then there's, within the media and politicians, there's another type as well, right? If you look at the media and BBC, for example, they're classic, which is if there's an attack on somebody in the public, and the person happens to be, let's just say, white, middle class, right, is the actual culprit, right? It's an incident took place.
Yeah.
If it happens to be someone who is recognised as a Muslim, guess what? There's criminals in every society, right? In every community. All the same, it's a person of that country, of that religion, right, going to that mosque or whatever else, right?
Yeah.
And so that bias built into the media generates and breeds half the hate in this
Yeah, it's
country.
become completely
Right.
normalised. That's
Yeah,
the
it's
problem.
normalised, of course it is.
Completely, yeah.
And it's the
wrong.
media that's complicit in this, and it's the
Absolutely.
biggest factor for the hate. Right, so how would you, and really I'm really interested in the two main parties,
Yeah.
forgive me Aadil and James, but you know, you guys are liaising with people who are having influence in Parliament. How would you address that?
I think that as for a Green Party, I've been an active friend and cooperator with the Anisa women's group who meet at a school, a Park Lane school in Wembley. And there's two issues on which we've discussed, very important issues.
They produced a report, didn't they?
One is prevent, and a way that victimised and stereotyped Muslim people, and particularly in schools, children were often referred to prevent because of remarks they made and so on, which were based on stereotypes. I've done prevent training, I know what the stereotypes are. But the other issue is Islamophobia and the concept of Islamophobia. And ISA's position is that the current and the House of Commons definition is wrong because it treats Islamophobia as racism. And they say Islam is a multiracial religion. There are white European Muslim people, African, Asian, and so on. And it's a form of discrimination based on religion, not on race, and that has to be recognised. Islamophobia, and I'm not very fond of phobia type concepts either, but it's also about discrimination in employment, discrimination in sort of entering premises and things like that. And it's actually happening at schools now for children. Muslim children who want to show that they support Palestine are having symbols removed, kafirs removed, they're being put in detention for having those things. Their freedom of speech is being smashed, with nobody making any protest about the mothers who are beginning to get together and challenge that. So I think it was World Refugee Day yesterday, and there was a concerted effort by some mums I think they were mothers, in Brent, for their children to wear something, almost as a fashion garment, but indicating their Palestinian roots and their solidarity with Palestine. So it takes all sorts of forms. And that's the argument of the schools was we don't want to cause any disturbance. And the same thing happened in Brent, when Brent councillors wanted to pass a resolution in support of Palestinians, and they were told that it would disrupt community relations. That's a kind of inbuilt systemic discrimination, I think.
I mean, when you had that French journalist killed, right, and when all the flags go up, people don't say it's spoiling harmony with Muslims. You don't say that because it's obvious it isn't, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with a lot of what Martin said. I think the Liberals and the Liberal Democrats have always been at the forefront of human rights cases, and we, I mean, one of the concrete things we would do is stand up for the European Convention of Human Rights that the Tories are looking to slash, and we've heard nothing from Labour about how they're going to protect those hard-earned rights for all our communities. So I agree, it's a scourge that we need to tackle. We need to tackle it at a systemic level, all different parts of society, through education, through the media, and through legislation, and that's why we would continue to commit, as we've always done, for strong human rights legislation.
Aadil, you want to tackle?
Sure. Would you like to go?
No.
Okay.
I'll let James go first this time.
I think I've said enough about Islamophobia and how I feel about it, so it's okay. Yeah.
I'll let you cover that, and then we're going to go to the Prevent programme.
No, sure. So I want to dissect it a little bit rather than generalist statements about Islamophobia. I think the fundamental premise of Islamophobia is being lost in the fact that it's not being acknowledged, not least by the Tory party apparatus. Suella Braverman calling most Pakistani men, insinuating most Pakistani men are involved in grooming gangs. Lee Anderson's abhorrent comments about Sadiq Khan, and several other institutionally Islamophobic comments. For instance, recently a police officer, as mentioned in the unnecessary report, I would suggest everyone to read this, from denial to action. Okay, a great body of work is done to actually implement the definition of Islamophobia, and the biggest travesty in Brent Council at this point in time is a lack of inclusion in its EDI directives, putting Islamophobia as a separate faith-based crime, a faith-based hate activity. In fact, it is under the broader definition of racism. Islamophobia needs to be on par with anti-Semitism. Okay, none of which takes precedence over the other. Any form of hate or xenophobia is criminal, but there is an abject lack of recognition by the Tory party. When Lee Anderson made his comments to Sadiq Khan, Oliver Dowden took long enough to denounce it. None of the party members actually mentioned the word Islamophobia. They mentioned anti-Muslim hatred. They can't. So acknowledgement, accountability begins at acknowledgement, and I think I would be personally pushing for education, systemic education across all facets of society, schools, institutions, and I pledge my full support.
No, like I said, I think I've covered Islamophobia quite strongly.
I want to cover on this topic just one more, which is will you commit to opposing Prevent and support its scrapping? Until that happens, will you commit to supporting the removal of the public sector duty on Prevent?
What's the last bit, sorry?
Until that happens, will you commit to supporting the removal of the public sector duty on Prevent? So at the moment there's a duty in the public sector to report people based on Prevent. Right? Example, school teachers. Right? I have 2 family members of teachers, and things they see their colleagues do, they flinch. Like, really? You know, and the people are being reported through Prevent, which basically just innocent remarks, or what would be considered normal in any other culture. But because they,
So clear answer to that: yes and yes.
I know your stance, but you want to say anything?
Everyone else go first.
Martin?
With Anissa we set up a Facebook account called Monitoring Prevent in Brent, and we ask people to report cases, etc., of that. I did prevent training. I did a prevent training, as I mentioned, and the funny thing was that they were talking about people becoming radicalised, and I told them that I had been radicalised as a young person by the Suez crisis and Hungarian crisis, and that helped make me a socialist. I didn't quite know how to answer that.
Now,
so Prevent, I think it's inherently racist, full stop, and I think it needs to be abolished. You have extremists in every single walk of life, no matter what colour they are, what faith they have, and I just think it's wrong that we are focusing on one specific faith, and that has to stop.
Now, I know we're running out of time, but there's one question I think I really do need to ask. So did you not answer? Sorry, I didn't. My apologies. Sorry.
I think fundamentally Prevent, as an entire premise, I detest, because it is loaded with Islamophobia. It puts the whole idea of somebody reporting extremism based on extreme Islamic elements or a radicalized version of Islam is actually prone to interpretation. So the right-wing guys or the racists will have an absolute field day because they will be projecting their own perception of Islamophobia on a person's actions. Okay, and the whole idea that they called it Prevent instead of something like engage or integrate. Okay, that sets the precedent for xenophobia.
Thank you. All right, I just want to do one quick question, right? Because I think it's contentious.
The gentleman wants to ask a question.
Go on.
What I want to say is this. I think it's important for me to say. I'm actually Jewish. I know this chap knows me extremely well, another chap knows me extremely well. But there are, just like with Islam, there are shades and shades. There are shades and shades because the ultra-Orthodox won't have anything to do with the army. They're due to, well, it's a mixture. They don't have all, they're not all the same strand. And what I'll say is my rabbi, he wants to get closer to Islam, and he does. And also another thing, which is the environment. I'm very much against HS2. And I'm sure everyone here is against HS2.
Okay, so I'm going to just ask one quick question. I think we're going to call it a day. You know, I need to ask this. Sorry.
Oh.
All right.
We should have a woman voice as well.
No, we should do.
Yeah.
But I'll give you your question after I ask this question. Is that okay? And then we'll close the meeting. Is that okay? All right.
Yeah.
Sorry to put you on the spot, guys, but many voters feel there is a little difference between Conservative and Labour in this election, and I'm sure you'd agree with that, right? Okay.
But they're not here.
No, they're not here. So, would you consider working with each other to support a unity candidate in the interest of Brent's constituents?
It's too late.
Yeah, but I'd just like to point out that the Workers' Party all over the country stood aside for good independence, and we were very vocal about doing so, and I'm a bit disappointed that didn't happen here. I think it would have made a massive difference. I think we had a real opportunity to oust Labour from here, and we should have worked together to do that, like we did for the Newham Independents, for example. We've done it all over London, and we had a real shot here, which is a shame.
Just to say that we weren't approached by anybody about standing down or whatever.
But is that an opportunity missed that maybe you guys should have reached out?
Well, I was actually going to say something if I was allowed to round up at the end of it now. I watched the debates, some of you have, on TV, and you know the one with the 7 candidates, from the nationalist parties, Greens, etc. Aside from reform, there was a lot of agreement between nationalist parties, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. And I think when we get into Parliament, I mean, what's happened, it's a pity the Labour Party's not here, because the Labour Party has moved right. Liberal Democrats are now to the left of the Labour Party in many of their policies. And I think the independents who get in, and I hope some do, including possibly Pamela Fitzpatrick in Harrow, that's our nearest one, that they can form a kind of alliance that will hold the Labour Party to account and push it towards more radical policies. It's probably a vain hope, but there is a possibility of doing that kind of cooperation, not so much as when we stand in election, but when we get in there, that they work together. Caroline Lucas, our only MP, worked very closely with some people in the Labour Party and some Liberal Democrats and put forward legislation and all sorts of things. That is possible. I think that's the way to work in future.
But I think there's a lesson, isn't there, for all people standing for the next election, that the two parties aren't going to change, and the rest have all got
that's why we've
got to work and help the electorate be tactical and getting policies that help the electorate.
But that's not standing aside. So I totally agree. Once elected, absolutely open to cooperation where we share values and share ideas. But I think our fundamental principle is we give the voters the choice, and we wouldn't look to step aside. We trust the voters to make up your mind. You're all adults, citizens, engaged people. You can vote for whoever you want. And where we see, what we're going to see next week is tactical voting on a nationwide scale. That's hopefully going to be good for the Greens, hopefully going to be good for us, because people are sensible enough to know who can defeat the incumbent in their areas. We don't need to come up with pacts.
I think if you look at the data of the last election, second was Conservative. And I think you'll correct me. I said, wasn't it by 4,000?
Which election are we talking about?
What in this?
In Brent East.
It was
no, it was
21,000.
No, the difference.
Yeah. It was over 20,000.
It was 21,000. Yeah. Between.
It's totally. But look, fundamentally, one way to address this once and for all is what we're putting forward is proportional representation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. That solves this. Okay.
But you pushed that for 30, 40 years.
Absolutely.
No one's listening to you.
Well,
let's see. Even when you were in coalition. That was one of your tenants that you wanted, and they didn't give it to you.
We tried.
Who have you got?
Look, wait. This time next week, ask me again if we've got 60 MPs who are all going to be making that case.
Well, let's hope so.
Okay, because that solves this issue.
When it comes to fine margins in Parliament, we saw that when there was a hung Parliament, and the Conservatives chose to side with the DUP out of nowhere. Every MP matters, be them an independent or part of a political party. Martin, I sincerely hope you have the same enthusiasm for me as a local Brent resident standing up as an independent, unifying all the residents, unifying the vote. I think we can give Dawn Butler a big square. In fact, I'll go further and I'll say we can probably dethrone her. There's less than 1 week to go. I think we have the momentum. James, in all fairness to you, George Galloway yourself didn't know I was standing, and I understand your intentions are pure, but I'm open to unifying our vote. I'm open to unifying the vote against, but on the premise that you endorse me and you step aside and you join my campaign.
Unfortunately, if I did that, it'd be a hostile action against the party, and my membership would be cancelled, and I'd never be allowed to run again for the Workers' Party. So the only opportunity would be for you to stand aside.
You could become an independent too then.
However, I stand with George Galloway. I think it'd be hard to stand against George Galloway, a guy that has put his principles first in every decision he's made over the last 4 decades. That's the man that you want to
Or if we vote Liberal Democrat, we reform the system and everyone can vote for who they want.
Chair, can I make a suggestion? We're all blokes up here.
Yeah, that's it.
We're all men, and can we give some women a chance to ask some questions towards the end?
Okay. Possible conscription, possible all-out war with Russia. Thanks to the Russians, we speak English and not German. What's your foreign policies like? What's the landscape in your party or as an independent, and your thoughts with conflict with Russia at the moment?
I can start that if you like. I helped write some of our foreign policy for the Liberal Democrats, and as I said, I've worked in foreign affairs for some time. So look, the principle of sovereign territory, the right of the Ukrainians to have their territory respected is fundamental principle of international law, and we see the Russian invasion as clear aggression and against that. So it's a very clear point for us that that is an illegal invasion, and we're supporting the Ukrainians with our NATO allies to push that back. I think in terms of wider foreign policy, we've got 3 strands to our foreign policy as Liberal Democrats, and that's looking at defence, diplomacy and development, and making sure that those are strategically aligned, that also align with our values as a party and as a country, that we promote peace, stability and justice globally. But that does include repelling aggression where needed.
Can I just point out though, the war with Russia, the conflict with Russia did not start in 2022.
No,
it started
right.
in the Maidan coup in 2014
Right.
when the CIA overthrew a democratically elected government in Ukraine. And I don't say that out of naivety. I've spent a lot of time in Ukraine, and I know a lot of Ukrainian people who were very upset that this invasion was allowed to happen. Yeah. As a Workers' Party, we are completely against conscription. We're completely against any war with Russia. It is absolute suicide.
So would you support Ukraine in their defence of their land now?
No.
So what would you do?
Because I don't feel that we have the money to spend all that funding in Ukraine when everything is broken here. The communities are really struggling. We cannot be sending billions and billions of pounds a year supporting, and it is NATO aggression. It's been an ever-expanding NATO aggression for decades, and that's been very clear. The Soviet borders have retreated since the 90s. The only borders that have expanded are NATO. So I think it's very naive to say we need to defend Ukraine here, when all we are looking to do in Ukraine is make it another NATO vassal, to arm to the teeth and have another threat on Russia's border.
I'm in agreement with James for once. Hello.
It's nice, isn't it?
It's good to be in sync. Look, if you look at the map around the world of US military bases, okay? And if you look at the map, it's very easy to find in Google. They are strategically pointed, almost passively aggressively obsessed with Russia all around the world. When Russia tried to do the same and put a military base in Cuba, we saw what happened, right? We saw they destabilized.
You weren't born. Yeah, that was 60, 70 years ago.
But we saw an example of that. Now, I'm in agreement that we need constructive dialogue, we need diplomacy. The UK has pledged since 2022 £12.5 billion. Let's just quantify this: £12.5 billion towards military aid and assistance to Ukraine. Direct. We're not talking about weapons licenses. Direct military aid. That can feed a generation of homeless people. That can settle a generation of people facing the housing crisis. That can work wonders. That can work wonders for the NHS, and that's a lot of money we're paying, like James said, in foreign land when we are here crippling and crumbling as an economy. And there needs to be constructive dialogue, not sanctions, not persecuting Russian people, not being racist towards Russian sports teams, Because that is not what equality and justice is, and that goes against the social fabric of UK's democracy.